Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, and we are coming to you live 9 p.m. on the West Coast, the CBB version of the show. We have an absolute huge day of college hoops prepared, ready to delve into. It's a very exciting time. College football this week, it's just the Army-Navy showdown, so there's not a lot going on there. That's why there was no CFB Super Show. On the FTN Network, we're going to have a jam-packed week for you, though, because there is bowls, and more bowls. And not the kind that you would be thinking on the West Coast in Washington. Not those legalized bowls on in Seattle. We're talking about bowl games. Huge slate next Saturday of bowl games. We'll be talking about that on Thursday night next week, myself and Jake Kuchek breaking it down for you. For articles tomorrow, there is going to be a breakdown of that Army-Navy showdown if you're trying to play that, trying to grind that. There will be a top play style piece for the main CBB slate, which we're going to go over here right now. There will also be a core/player pool in that article for the afternoon and the night slate. 3 different slates that we have available. I'll also be back tomorrow morning. That'll be a Q&A version of the CBB show. Normally that's a college football show. It'll be kind of like question and answer time. If you want to ask about Army-Navy, you certainly can, but that'll be just basically going over any last-minute bets, prop stuff, prize picks, any lineup changes, just answering questions and kind of hanging out, drinking coffee and waking up, getting ourselves ready for the day. A big one ahead for sure. Primarily going to be talking about DraftKings. The FanDuel main slate's a little bit smaller. I know they're starting to come through with more slates than they did last year, but I'm not at a point yet where I'm ready to talk about FanDuel very much. If you have FanDuel specific questions, you can certainly ask those tomorrow, and we can look at that together. But as of now, most of my stuff's going to be primarily focused on DraftKings. By the way, I don't know how many of you grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s. Cash Money, Hot Boys, Lil Wayne, all that stuff. BG, released from prison a couple of months ago. There's a freestyle from BG going around Twitter right now, and it is absolutely amazing. Has me totally hyped for the show right now. If you guys know about BG, nobody's messing with BG, that's for sure. Got me excited for this big day of college basketball hoops. Lots going on. It is an 11-game slate for the main. It's a 6-game afternoon slate and then a 4-game night slate. The nightcapper there, which has a pretty intriguing battle of Washington State between Gonzaga, the Bulldogs, of course, and America's team, the Washington Huskies. Gonzaga has owned us for years and years and years. That should be a fun one. The UC Irvine Anteaters are on the slate as well. Battle of New Jersey, Rutgers and Seton Hall, and Notre Dame taking on Marquette. That's going to be a fun one. We're not going to talk about that tonight, but tomorrow we'll definitely get into it. Lots of excitement. This 11-gamer, there are 2 Mania Qs. One is the $30 level, which is Mania Q, I believe, number 3. And then there is a Q at that's number 4. And then Mania Q number 5 at the $250 level. 267 people in the $30 queue. Got to be perfect in that one. 37 people in the $250 queue. Not so perfect in that one. Just have to hit your leverage play and hope for the best and no chalk, that detonates that you try to get away from. Lots of good contests, lots of cash games, lots of winner-take-all stuff, double ups, loaded up. There's tons that you can get involved with. There is a 222. There's $100 GPP, a 50, a 33, a 12, a 5, a 3, a 1, a quarter, 50 cents, whatever you are trying to get involved with. There is something for you at every single dollar level. It's finally the first Saturday slate for college basketball season where there isn't a substantial amount of college football games, which allowed this to happen. Let's make sure we do our part, fill these up, make this happen so that they continue to make them nice and big. Typically, once college football ends, you're going to see, and a lot of people complain about contests. It's a thing that just happens every year. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. Those are your if you're looking for big slates and contests that are going to match, those are the 3 days you really want to make sure you play. You want to play every day, of course, and grind with us, but those are the 3 days where you're going to be able to have those opportunities to win $5,000, to win a couple grand, to win these big prizes and have those shots at the Mania Q. Whoa. There is a DFS Army man here in the chat. Razzle 11 Grinds. What is up, Razzle? My man, what is up? It's a name I have not thought about in a long time. No, I'm just kidding. Razzle's in the Dynasty. We talk to him all the time. He's a good dude. We'll have to have him on soon. Good to see you, man. Thanks for checking in. Yeah, this is speaking of which, I'm so happy about the queue that they're deciding to now run it earlier in the year and just spread it out instead of just jamming it into the last month of the season, because it's kind of lame as hell, right? The last month, then they're like, wow, there's still 12 seats left. There's only 3 full slates left and a bunch of 2-gamers. This is awful. And then that's what happens. So having it spread out like this enables them to at least have them on great full days, spread it out. You're not able to, good for most of us. You don't go broke chasing the queues all at once. Gives you an opportunity after each shot that you take to kind of, grind out some cash games and rebuild that BR and then take another shot. So it is a really good opportunity here early on to try and do so. The first 3 seats have been won by 2 of them regulars in the FTN chat room, Discord community, and then 1 over there on RPS, one of our good friends, Kurt. So familiar names winning it, but it is a lot of seats left. No need to be discouraged, but winning it early is definitely a nice thing because you tell yourself, I queued, I don't have to play them anymore. Obviously, we're psychos. We'll continue to play anyways, but at least you don't feel obligated to play every single one. And you can take those 250 queues off if you don't actually have a Sadie ticket or something like that, because that's a significant chunk of BR, no matter how much you have in there to take a shot on a queue and actually lose, right? Because that'll take a big day away from you in a hurry if you cash everything else and not that. But this is a great day to do it. 11-game slate. Just getting over being sick. You guys remember last week had the whole like Aunt Edna smoker's voice thing going on. That's gone, thankfully. Drinking a coffee, nothing like it at not after 9 o'clock. I want to make sure I have the energy to go through this slate. Let's do it. Let's get after it. Let's talk about game number 1, which is going to be Cal playing bright and early against Butler. 9 a.m. for them. That is a really early time for West Coast teams. A couple of years ago, my friend Saw, who was around the industry doing this thing, made a good point. These teams that aren't used to playing these early morning times sometimes lay eggs early in the morning, or they're just not, their body clocks aren't adjusted to it, or perhaps they're college kids. They weren't disciplined enough to not, do what they do. And sometimes it ends up being a rough outing. So I would certainly have that worry about Cal here against Butler. KenPom's projection is 81-69 in favor of Butler. Butler scoring 81 points. It almost seems unfathomable, but Mark Madsen is really going through a lot of trouble and pain and suffering here with this Cal team. And I thought that might be the case. He brought in some really big names in the transfer portal, but it hasn't come together. Defensively, they are not good. They're relying heavily on Jalen Tyson. However, they did just get Keontae Kennedy back. That's huge. Obviously, having him as he's been around the block. He's been for UTEP, Xavier, Memphis. He has played since 2018. He has really, really a lot of experience. Made his season debut last week, I should say, against Santa Clara. He started and played 34 minutes. That was a game that they won. He did have 10 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal, 21% usage rate. Should make him a relatively popular value play when you look down there and see him at 4-5. This is, of course, a Zach Edey slate. We'll get to that in a second. But Keontae Kennedy starting at 4-5, regardless, even though the Butler perimeter defense, especially our guy, got to get a Butler. You guys see that? I got to get the Butler version of that. But, Posh Alexander locking in and locking down on Keontae Kennedy. So we'll see how that works out. But I definitely think at 4-5, you got to use him. He's expected to be a starter and playing 30-plus minutes. He's just going to be a really important piece. Even when Devin Askew is healthy, they'll be less obligated to have to use him, right? Because less Devin Askew is usually a little bit of a better situation. So Kennedy, an obvious play here. Love Jalen Tyson. He's been low owned throughout the season whenever Cal's on the slate. 9K is a tremendously high price to pay. Now, we're going to have some value on this one where we can actually pay up for guys, and this is going to suit those players who prefer the stars and scrubs approach to builds and not the balanced Betty approach. And that is going to make guys like Jalen Tyson somewhat alluring. However, I think it's going to be a Zach Edey, and then people will have to drop down to that next tier in the 7K range. So Jalen Tyson makes sense in large field GPPs a lot because we know he's going to play damn near every single minute. He is going to be a threat for a double-double regardless of how good Butler's perimeter defense is, and he's going to take roughly 18 to 20 shots. So at 9K, it might seem like a high sticker price, and it is, but Tyson is an absolute stud in this Mark Madsen system, so I don't mind going there if you're building multiple or alt lineups. Jalen Cone, no thanks, only shoots. I know 7-2. Fardaz Emek, 8-6. That's going to be a really tough price to get to. He does have some pretty high scores, even scored 41 fantasy points against SDSU and against Tulane, who are no longer in love with. No Jalen Cook. But playing a ton of minutes, if he doesn't get into foul trouble, he's definitely capable of paying off this 8-6, but I do not foresee him avoiding foul trouble in this particular matchup, in this particular spot, especially considering the fact that they're going to get a bad whistle. I am already predicting a bad whistle for Fardaz, like 3, if Madsen lets him get 3 fouls in the first half kind of thing. I just think he's not going to be basically a non-factor. So Keontae Kennedy is really what we want to go away with on this side. Butler, there is my man Posh, who lives in that 6K range. He had a pretty nice outing against Texas Tech, one of the best games I've ever seen him play, a triple-double. You absolutely love to see that. He followed that up against a bad Buffalo team with an 8-7-6. It's going to be a threat. The threat for the triple-double where, the Braden Smiths, where they don't usually hit it, but they've got that like 12, 9, and 8 stat line, and Jalen Tyson has those all the time. So I like Posh here as well. I think against Cal, he's going to absolutely own everyone on the perimeter. I think he racks up a very high steal number. The only thing is his erratic shooting still hasn't developed this entire time of his career into a three-point shooter. That's made it tough. He has to rely on his ability to get to the basket, draw fouls, get bailed out. But his peripherals are strong, and we know that. So at 6'5", you can use him if you're running a more balanced approach. He's just certainly not going to be a priority for us. Pierre Brooks has been a fantastic addition for Butler. Still has that guard forward eligibility. We like that. He's had a couple of down games for where he's priced at almost 7K, but typically still taking a ton of shots. He's taken 25 shots in the past 2 games alone. A bit shot reliant, yes, opposite of Posh in that regard, but definitely somebody that we can look at because it's a matchup against Cal that they should do pretty well. And the fact that, Ken Pomp's projection of 80 points is pretty stellar for a Butler team. I must say it's a bit of a shock there for me to see that. The official total is 147.5 on DK, with Butler being 8.5 point favorites. It's just a weird time we're living in here in 2023-24 college basketball. Haven't quite gotten used to some of these lines that we're seeing. There is one player I have a lot of interest in the Butler side and would potentially be using in DJ Davis at 5'5", coming off a pretty porous game against Buffalo, in which he shot 1 for 7. This is yet another player who is generally going to be reliant on his scoring ability. We saw him pour in 25 real points against Texas Tech. Shout out to Rob, because he had DM'd me earlier in the day and said, this is the DJ Davis game. I, of course, told him to get lost, and DJ Davis went off. So kudos to him for knowing his team. And they scored 103 points against Texas Tech. We're used to Texas Tech being a stout defense, right? And obviously that game went to overtime. But even before that, like, they put up a really big number on this Texas Tech team that you wouldn't have expected to happen. A lot of this has to be a success on the offensive side, has to be given to the Northeastern transfer, Jamil Telfort. He has been fantastic. High rates across the board, shooting about 35% from long range. Been a solid enough rebounder. He is just contributing in all categories. Too high for me at 7.4, but he does deserve the shout out there, and somebody who's playing a lot of minutes for this team. 50 against Buffalo, 43 against Texas Tech. Some people might look at that and be like, 7.4 is not that high, but I just don't think I'm there with him. I'd rather just pay down and take either Davis or go with Posh in that regard. A lot of love for Finley Bizjack by the Peanut Gallery. The CBB community as well loves Finley Bizjack, not playing a lot at 3-4 just yet, so we don't have a great value on that side, but Keontae Kennedy is definitely the play we're going to come away from here, using in the majority of our lineups, or at least our main build and what we want to go to war with and everybody else. And it's okay that he's going to be heavy chalk. Sometimes we just have to eat that chalk and bear it, that gift that goes around where the guy has the two, erasers from the chalkboard and hits them together and hits his face. Like, it's okay. It's okay to do that. A lot of experience means it's old. DeAndre Williams, old. There was a kid on the slate today named DeAndre Williams, by the way. It made me feel like maybe he traded in his jersey to get another year of eligibility somewhere. What's up, Jody? Good to see you, my brother. Good to see you. Happy as always. All right, moving on here. We got Illinois versus Tennessee. This is a really intriguing matchup from a standpoint that I think a lot of people will gravitate towards this one. It's going to be a really quite a competitive game. It is a 7-point spread in favor of Tennessee. I think Illinois is live to cover that. 146 total. That one worries me because when I look at it, I feel like this is going to be a defensive battle, right? Like, we already know Illinois, they've been really getting it done on the defensive end. Granted, they just gave up almost 90 to FAU, I know, but generally their defense has been really solid, and they're top 15th in defensive efficiency. Their 2-point defense especially is elite. Offensively, they've been getting it done as well. Tennessee, their defense has been stout for a long time under Rick Barnes. Offensively, it's hit or miss sometimes, but they're second in defensive efficiency in the country. So I feel a little bit worried. Ken Palm's projection on this one, 76-71, but I feel like we could see a game that's played in the 50s late and then free throws pushing it into the 60s there. So I think the under's live there from a betting perspective, but I just feel like I want to pump the brakes a little bit because I do sense that the industry is going to be really involved in this game. And there are a few pieces in it that are great, right? Dalton Connect, obligatory once per slate, even when Tennessee's not on the slate, mention of Dalton Connect. Still wish that he would have ended up in North Carolina. Suffered the injury there in that just massive game that just crushed North Carolina, even though they lost. Played 24 minutes in the following game, pretty lackluster. It was a blowout. They didn't need him to do a whole lot, so he dropped down to 17 fantasy points, which causes his price, this dynamic DK pricing that we pretty much like a lot, right? And it's going up and down very fast, and we're able to get some buy low opportunities with the way they're pricing right now. Connect at 7.6 is definitely an opportunity for us in a close game here against Illinois to do really well. We know he's going to take a ton of shots, and even in games so far this year that I've worried about, hey, this might be a tougher spot for him. The defense is going to be really, honed in on him. He's still been able to produce, and that was back when I still thought Wisconsin's defense was going to be, somewhat elite as well. But he's been putting up 30+ consistently. Even Purdue game, right around 30. Kansas did a good job of containing him, but he still took 17 shots. Kansas perimeter and wing defense, we know, is really tight. 4 for 17 from the field there. North Carolina's defense is completely trash. So he did put up a big number against them. I would suspect that we see him take 15 plus shots here, but there are several bodies on the Illinois defense that they can throw at him. So it's keeping me from like locking him in, because I have a few plays in the next game that I feel like I have to have. And if we're going to play Zach Edey, probably should have started with that game. Just kind of exposed my hand there. But if we're going to play Zach Edey, which we never do, or I never do, I should say, we're going to have to make some really good decisions and not whiff on our 2 to 3 mid-range plays that we get in there with Edey and Dalton connects. It's going to take some salary gymnastics and aerobics to be able to get him in with Edey and still play the Florida State guys that I want, and make this flow together. So really big decision that I'll have to make there on Dalton Connect. I do think he flies under the radar a little bit for that reason alone, because of pricing. But at this point, people know just how good he is. Coming into the season, I don't think anyone really truly believed, shun the non-believers, but those in the know knew how good Dalton Connect was at Northern Colorado and knew how good he could produce at any level. 29% shot rate, almost 40% from long range, 26% usage rate, doing a lot of the scoring for this Tennessee team. Needs the other guys to step up defensively, or offensively as well, because there's other guys who are just not scoring at the rate that they need to. Vescovi, Gainey, if he gets more minutes. We know he can bang down low. Triple J's really hit or miss sometimes. And then it comes down to our guys, Zakai Zeigler. I was going to mention him at 4.7. Very, very good price. Now, we used him against North Carolina at 4.3. He ended up being low owned. It was kind of like maybe people didn't buy into, is he healthy yet? He's coming off that, really serious injury that he lost a lot of time with. Minutes are headed in the right direction. He's taking a fair amount of shots. He's initiating the offense, 13 assists in the past 2 games. Not scoring at a tremendous level, but if he keeps coasting into this 20-22 fantasy point range, I don't know how we don't play him at 4.7, but then I'm in a predicament because I really don't want to sit here and stack Tennessee against Illinois. That's the real tough decision for me and what's been bothering me the last couple of hours going over the slate. Once I got done with work and kind of went into my preliminary lineups, kept finding myself clicking in Zeigler and Connect. And it was like, it just doesn't feel right. And I wonder if others are going to be feeling that way as well. And if they just go with it kind of thing. But Zeigler at that price is really intriguing. Anytime he's under 5K, I think we can just continually plug him in. Even if he wasn't starting, he would still be a pretty solid option. But the fact that he's been in the starting lineup the past 2 games and played almost 30 minutes makes him a pretty tough fade. If I can only play one Vols at the end of the day, it's going to be him because of the salary savings that he's going to provide for me. On the Illinois side, we saw a ton of Coleman Hawkins chalk against FAU. He ended up working out. He had 3 steals and a block. Had a poor first half, and had foul trouble, but did have 22.5 fantasy points. Curious to see what the ownership ends up being on him at 5.5, because it's another price where people are going to look at. But I would probably caution from going like 100% on Coleman Hawkins. I felt pretty leery of him even against FAU. I think I am ending up respecting FAU's defense a little bit too much, more than I probably should. I was lower on Hawkins than everybody else. We did have some other options in his range that ended up playing quite well. Tyler Burton of Villanova. Of course, we got an injury that helped us out with that one, and he was 7%. So that's kind of where my head would be at again today with those 2 on the slate. I just don't have any trust for Hawkins. But if he has another big game and then goes over 6K, then I don't have to worry about him anymore. So I'm fine if he wants to do that. Tennessee has a bunch of bodies down low. I think he does find life a little bit more tough here. And if people are going to be, heavily owned on him, or he's going to be 30% or something like that on a slate this size, I'm okay getting away from him. Terry Shannon, to play him or to not at 8.3, same kind of thing against the Vols. How much do we respect their perimeter defense? It has been fairly stout. So I don't know that Shannon's necessarily a great play at 8.3, although he's a good play. Mainly a GPP option here. This would be a Q winning type of play. I don't foresee him being a main team option here. Has been relatively safe, but you look at the opponents that they've played. Granted, he did play really well against FAU, 33 real points. Against Rutgers, 45 fantasy points. He's been pretty consistent hitting that 30, 34 mark. So he's about 4X at this price point. So we should make it seem like he's a main team play, but I just feel like if he's going to be usable here, it's going to be a 50 that he pops against this Tennessee team, or he's going to be sub 30. I don't see him coasting into a 4X in this one. I think that they are going to be concentrating on making life hell for him, and it's just going to be a matter of how fouls are contained, and if Tennessee can, make life difficult with him without reaching and without picking up ticky-tack fouls. Domask had a huge outing. He also had scored 33 real against FAU. I would not expect him to repeat that performance. That would be one I would really be happy if people chased. I have very little interest in him at this price. I think that he's more apt to put up 15 fantasy points than he will put up 50 again this year. Does come with guard forward eligibility. Always a special spot in my heart for those guys with that dual roster eligibility, but he's really not that great of a play to me. The only other option I would really consider would be Luke Good. We nailed him against Rutgers. He went very, very well at 4.3, but at 5.1, I'm not as keen to pay that price. Prefer him under 5K, or at least in a matchup where I think he can take advantage. He is getting those consistent 20 to 25 minutes. So we know he's going to be on the floor there. He's going to take shots generally. He can rebound a little bit, but this is just not the greatest spot to target him. And then worth noting that Justin Harmon, the Utah Valley transfer, did play 22 minutes against FAU. Minutes starting to come up for him. He's 4.7. Hasn't quite figured it out. I just think for him, there's not a lot of shots available when Terry's taking so many. Domask is taking so many. Guerrier, he's got his obligatory 1 to 3 shots per game that he takes, and then it's pretty much spread out against the rest of the team here. But it doesn't leave a lot for Harmon because Shannon is taking so much. But at 4.7, he's at least a GPP value type of look that you could potentially use. He was very good last year at the mid-major level. So we can come out of these first 2 games with Keontae Kennedy and Zakai Zeigler and really not have spent much at all. And then we coast into this Florida State game, which I have a lot of interest in. Florida State, typically under Leonard Hamilton, it's not a fun ordeal because his rotations tend to be deep, right? And we know that. But he, over the last couple of seasons, has dealt with major injuries, ineffectiveness, and it's caused his rotation to shrink down some. Now, he's always a threat to pull off some walk-on, some water boy, some fan in the stands, It's a razzle type where it's like, you got some eligibility, let's go, let's throw you out there, and you'll hit a couple threes, and just this random guy makes value. So that's always a potential to happen. And he's still running about a 9-man rotation, so it's not as if he's turned into Ed Cooley and he's running his starters into the ground. He is playing Jameer Watkins and Darren Green a lot. Deontay Green has seen a sudden spike in minutes. Baba Miller is always going to be there. And then he's rotating that 5th spot between Jalen Warley, Cameron Fletcher, and Chandler Jackson, at least lately. Jalen Gainey, who missed significant time last year with the injury, hasn't quite gotten to the level where it looks like he's going to be able to play significant minutes. He's very good, but he has not gotten on there. And Josh Nickelberry is kind of ineffective right now, so he's playing 10-ish minutes a game, enough to take away from others, but not enough to ever be a DFS play. So there are 2 plays in this Florida State side that I like a lot going up against this South Florida team. Now, Ken Pom has it 75 to 66 in favor of Florida State. 2 Florida schools. They are calling it a neutral court game. Taking place in Sunrise, Florida. Now, I admit I am not super familiar with Sunrise, Florida, to be able to call that a neutral court game by any means. But as of now, South Florida is not a very good team. Amir Abdur-Rahim, who's their coach, has a lot of work cut out for him. Offensively, this team is struggling. They do have some chops defensively, but their offensive efficiency is terrible. They are going to give up a ton of rebounds each and every game. Florida State does quite well on the glass, at least on the offensive glass, and they do force turnovers to a degree, which I think we're going to see a lot of Jameer Watkins fantasy goodness in this one. And he is one of my favorite plays. And he does happen to be a forward, which has traditionally been a spot that has been really, really difficult to fill this season thus far. Really big fan of Jameer. He is taking a ton of shots. He has been absolutely one of the steadiest players on this team. A nice little 7K price point. He is, I think, with the ED lineups today, you're going to be able to afford like 2 other 7K plus players. And he is one, to me, that I'm prioritizing against this South Florida team. Leads the team in usage as starters, not Cameron Fletcher, but 26.2% usage rate, 24.4% shot rate, an assist rate of 25%, and a defensive rebounding rate of 20%. I always like to highlight these guys that have the high rates in not just scoring and usage, but also rebound at a decent high level, and they also have a higher assist rate. We call that the Derek Walker around these parts, right? It's a kind of a quarterback type, wing / big who has the ball go through his hands a lot. Also has a steal rate of 3%, and he's shooting about 35% from long range. So there's a lot of versatility with a player like this, and he can definitely do damage against this South Florida team. I do not foresee Jameer Watkins being a very popular play just because the price and I think Florida State's relatively unknown by people who aren't like Razzle or some of these grinder types who, watch all these games and pay attention to each and every slate and stream games and absorb all this content. Like, they'll know how good Jameer Watkins is. But I think some of the people, and I'm already seeing some that are coming over from NFL and some other stuff that I pay attention to some of these higher dollar CBB contests tomorrow that aren't CBB grinders. Don't want to give up the sauce there, but you'll notice some fresher names or some professional sports player names in the CBB streets tomorrow. And those are the types that I don't foresee knowing a lot about the Jameer Watkins type. So he's definitely my guy. Also have to mention that Deontay Green at 5K is still a very strong play. He has played over 25 minutes in 3 straight games. He got the UNLV game. He came and played 14 minutes total, but the second half he was on the court in crunch time. And as they started to pull away, he was a big reason why. And all he was really doing was standing under the hoop and catching whatever pass was thrown his way and putting the bunnies in the hole, whether it was a dunk or a layup or just a high percentage look. And he continually does that. He gets himself under the basket or he slips behind the defense, and it's Deontay Green. So I guess maybe defenses just aren't respecting him or whatever. But if you watch the last 3 Florida State games, he's consistently just standing behind the defense, getting a pass and making the high percentage shot. He has had 16 plus DK points in those 3 straight games. Still not probably priced where he should be. He's come up from 3-1 to 5K. That's a big jump, but he still has value at 5K, especially if we think he's going to continue to play 25 plus minutes. If he does against the South Florida team, he's absolutely a solid option. And if you're not comfortable paying 7K for Watkins, I get it, but I would recommend that you play Deontay Green then. Strong rates across the board, 22% usage rate, 12.5% offensive rebounding rate, 3.5% block rate. Made his first 3 the other day. Has a 5 fouls per 40 drawn rate, so he likes to draw fouls, but he also has a high foul rate as well. But since he's been getting those additional minutes, he's done a pretty damn good job. The other times he was coming in for like 2 or 3 minute stretches and just trying to make a highlight block and getting into that foul trouble early on. I think he has a lot of upside and a bright future. He's only a sophomore still, so there's still further development here for him, but this just feels like a Leonard Hamilton guy that almost comes out of nowhere and has this, really productive streak. And I think there will be a time where Green gets priced out and goes through some ineffectiveness and doesn't become a very consistent DFS option at times. But I think we can continue to ride him at least one more game in this spot against USF. Their schedule going forward has a couple of cakewalk type matchups. SMU, that's another matchup they should dominate. North Florida, Winthrop, Lipscomb. Before they get into their conference schedule. So there's going to be a time here for Deontay Green to keep racking it up. He may turn into a non-con hero. You guys know about my stance there. But as of right now, I think we can still look to him if you want to go that route. I'm really strongly considering playing 2 Florida State guys. Am I too involved in a Leonard Hamilton team? I might be. But with Cam Corhen, banged up, or I'm not sure. It's like he's having some some serious declines. There was a little bit of chatter that he said a comment to the coaching staff. I don't know the full extent of that, but clearly something's going on there, which has allowed Green to really step into this bigger role. Our guy, Bobo Miller, he's still getting his minutes. Say what you will about him. I know offensively he can appear to be challenged at times, but his athleticism is through the roof. He had a block the other day in the UNLV game where he straight up jumped with the guy, and it was not the highlight block to the stands. It was like the kind where you're just like up here and rips it away from the guy mid shot. Now, to me, that would be more embarrassing, having a guy just be like ripping your shot out of your hand mid jumper. I would rather just get my shot sent to the third row. Like, at least then I could be like, damn, but you just get punked hard when a guy takes it away from you like that. If he ever figures it out offensively, I think Bobo Miller could be a huge fantasy asset. I know at 5'6", people will probably just write that off. There isn't a lot of upside for him there. Foul trouble pops its head in there because he is trying to make that highlight block, or he's trying to reach and trying to get the steals. He just doesn't shoot enough. The UNLV game was especially upsetting for me. He was 4'8" there. He should have honestly paid off huge. He should have hit 30 because he was very active. He played 32 minutes. He just refused to shoot the ball. Anytime it got to him, the defense figured it out, even that he wasn't going to shoot. And it ended up being a lot of Deontay Green, a lot of Watkins. Worley was doing his thing. And Darren Green was hitting shots. It was no shot attempts from Bobo Miller at all. And that is a very big inefficiency in his game right now. So the 5'6" price point is probably not something that you'll want to touch. But if you're the 20 plus lineup making fella or gal, I think you want to have Bobo Miller exposure. I think at this point, we're so invested in Bobo Miller. If we don't continue to have some exposure, when he does finally, just decimate a slate, and it's going to happen, you're going to feel real bad about not having any, especially if you've been kind of using him the past season and a half, waiting for this big breakout to happen. I think they call that, what do they call that, Razzle, in the poker world? Pot committed. We might be pot committed here at this point. What's up, Don Place? Hope you have one bet for me tomorrow you really like. Yeah, well, nothing can be as bad as the NC State bet, right? Like, the NC State, like, this is your bet, man. I hate trying to, like, make a guarantee because, we have betting guys on our team who are really sharp, obviously Kutri and Mike Randall. And, I do my thing on props. And if I see a total that I like or a side that I think seems kind of off, like, I'll certainly bet it and put it in the tracker and recommend it. But I don't think anything can be bad as me saying NC State would win the game outright, that they ended up losing by 20. So I guess we can only go up from here, my friend. And I appreciate you continuing to still tune in and watch the show, because since they lost by 20 to Ole Miss, they have turned in a overtime win over Boston College, and they railed Maryland Eastern Shore. So they're heading in the right direction. I still like NC State, but yeah, we'll take a look at some betting stuff here. All right, on the South Florida side, there is a lot of cheapness, but there is a reason for that, because this team just doesn't have it together offensively. They do have a player by the name of Jaden Reed, freshman, who looks like he has all the tools to be a big-time star for this team. I'm not just saying that because I have him in Dynasty either. I really, watching him, was it the game against Hofstra? They got their doors blown off. But Reed was very active in that game, played 30 minutes, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 10 points, 2 steals, just like all over the place. And guys like Chris Youngblood and Corey Walker, like, they just look dead whenever they're on the floor. There's very low energy on this team. They're playing almost 12 guys, 15 plus minutes certain games, because they're searching for anybody who has energy. Jaden Reed's been that guy, but he's priced up to a level at 5'6" that has a little bit of upside there, and he's shown that. But I still truly believe this Florida State defense is going to end up being good. Now, I know this is a Florida State team that's given up a lot of points so far this season, but when you watch their games, I really feel like individual defense is going to be a strong suit for them. They'll still give up points. I think we're not really in the days of Princeton, heyday, where it's like, okay, a good defense is going to hold the team to 2 points. Like, That just doesn't happen. So you can still be a fairly decent defense and give up 80 points. Like, that's a real thing, right? Especially when you got these guys shooting threes from fucking McDonald's down the street. So I like Jaden Reed a lot. There is a bit of interest if you want a total cheap, like Hail Mary type play. David Ugunle is there at min price 3K. I was messing around with a couple of lineups that required a 3K player just to see what it would look like. He did play 15 minutes against UMass, played 13 against Hofstra, hit a 30% usage rate against Hofstra. Perhaps you could use a player like this. He does average 7 fouls per 40 minutes played, so there is that. If you can get past that, there's a chance here at 3K that, I really think it's just if you're taking anyone at 3K today at this slate, you're pretty much making a decision that Edie's going to score you 60 and that everybody else in your lineup will cover a potential bagel at 3K. I wouldn't recommend using him in your main and probably not in the queue either, but that is a player that I did notice while looking for anything at all that could be used for South Florida. Otherwise, Selton Miguel at 6'4" is really like the main guy, but he's not priced very cheap, over 6K, and you're talking about a situation here where he doesn't start, and that's not a deal breaker. There's plenty of guys who can be adequate off the bench, and he played 31 minutes, but this could be a game where he plays 20, could be 28, could be 22. At least that when he's starting, I can feel confident that he's gonna be like closer to 30, and it's a little bit hit or miss here. But he does absolutely chuck when he gets in the game. He has a 31% shot rate. So if you want a South Florida guy, it's probably him. But 6'4" doesn't feel very good. All right, now we get to Purdue and Alabama, the Zach Edey game. The illustrious Mike Kutry, the prop betting maestro, came into the Discord earlier when we were talking about Friday mid-major CBB to let us all know that. Not that he would be back playing, but that Kutry would be back. He was apparently turned into the Rock now, so he's talking in the third person and letting us know that he's going to be playing. And then the next comment out of his mouth, his Discord mouth, if you will, was, "I don't know how you could fade Zach Edey." So, and I tell you what, like I'm always looking for a reason to fade the highest price chalk whenever possible. Did it like for a year and a half with Luka Garza. It didn't hurt us as much as you'd think it would. We did it a lot last year with Zach Edey. It has not worked this year with Zach Edey. If you faded him, it really hasn't turned out to be too good. And I'm seeing some really, like the last Zach Edey slate, I saw some truly a borderline appalling lineups with Zach Edey that were cashing because he just did so much domination and Purdue, Braden Smith ended up playing like 20-something minutes. Didn't pay off. Edey's dropping the 60 bomb in 25 minutes. And then you've got a bunch of like 3.5K, 5K guys who are putting up, 2X, and people are just coasting to the cash line with the Edey. So it hasn't been very good for Stars and Scrubs builds this year. However, whenever All right, we're back. Sorry about that. It would not be a self-produced super show without one hiccup per night. We used our one hiccup, so we're good. No more hiccups. All right, pretty sure my voice was coming through, but not my picture. So which is probably better anyways. Don't want to see my face. Anyways, Zach Edey slates have been like the one Stars and Scrubs slate that has worked for those that enjoy to build that way. And this is certainly a spot against Alabama where you probably need to have Zach Edey. Mike was right. He said, I don't know how you can fade him, and I truly believe that as well. At 11.7K, I now officially believe he's still too cheap. He needs to get up to 12.4, which I don't know that we've really seen anyone priced at the level of 12.4, 13K since Zion Williamson. And maybe somebody out there can correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys remember the Zion Williamson days where we were paying 12.4, 12.7. I think that might have been the highest. I know Luka Garza got that expensive at some points. So I would expect Edie to start getting to that level here. And paying under 12K for him may not last for much longer. So I am in agreement. This is a slate where I am going to pay up for Zach Edey. He's the first click into the lineup. He's playing an Alabama team with a absolutely decimated front court. Nick Pringle is suspended, conduct detrimental to the team. I thought Pringle was going to be a hell of a lot better and more of a factor. He hasn't been. Grant Nelson, who we know from watching him for 3-4 years, he's good against low majors, he's good against mid majors, and some weaker high majors. But against teams like this, he would not be very good. But he probably isn't going to be playing because he hasn't been practicing whatsoever after suffering that injury in their last game. Had he played in this one, I would have loved to have seen him be chalk like he normally is, because I don't foresee him really having a fun time against an opponent like Purdue and especially Zach Edey. But that's not going to be an issue because it's very unlikely that he's going to play. That means Mo Weg, who had a really solid 24 minutes, 12.7 rebounds, 4 steals, 3 blocks, masterpiece game at 3.7 on the last Alabama slate. He's 5K. I wonder if people will play him because he is one of the few front court players left that has any potential to slow Edey down. But the problem is Edey gets every single call. And we talk about this on all the Purdue slates, so I won't go into it again. But how in the world are we going to see a situation in which he doesn't just sit down any of the remaining Alabama bigs immediately to the bench? And I believe this game they're playing this one is it Toronto? I think. Zach Edey, he's a Team Canada guy, right? He's from Toronto. So, I mean, geez, yes, this is just such a bad spot to fade Edey, but such a great spot to fade Edey if you have in the $30 queue, like a non-Edey lineup winning that seat would be miraculous, but also very possible. What could happen? God forbid an injury. God forbid he gets into foul trouble. And maybe Bama they're scrap and they're able to just push him out. Like you've seen other teams that have had success kind of like getting under his skin and just like getting underneath, not hurting him, but just kind of like pushing him out. It's not an easy thing to do, but we have seen it. And obviously Bama's going to have to knock down a ton of threes. Trading 3s for 2s, that'll pull them away from Edey as well. Although Edey has shown he has a nice looking jumper, and I want to see him take some 3s because I think he could hit them. But yeah, we can't fade him here. It's not even me, the true contrarian. Like I could bring Razzle on right now because he's also a pretty big contrarian. And I don't know, between the two of us, we could justify or give you a good enough argument on why you should fade Zach Edey in anything besides a alt Q build. So get ready to pay the price, pay the piper on this one. Means we won't be able to play Braden Smith at 8.5. He's the primary guy to use. I know it's different positions, but if you're fading Edey, you're hoping for a semi triple double from Braden Smith, like he had against Texas Southern, right? Where he had put up 51 fantasy points that day. Like if you get an outlook like that from him, and he matches total raw points with Edey, or in that game, that particular one, Edey was not needed, so he only had 28. That was a big time bust there. But you're hoping for Braden Smith putting up 40, 45 raw points, Zach Edey putting up 40, 45 raw points at max, maybe 50, and then you beat him on the X value marker return, and your other guys do well. So if you're fading Edey, there's really only one other guy on the team that's going to be capable of getting close to his raw total. And I know we want to look at X value return, but these lower scoring slates, because of tight pricing, has really required us to kind of examine the way we look at these builds and focus more on raw points. So I'm looking at it from that term. Then the next player in line is Lance Jones, who drops all the way to 5'7". It's out there for his defensive prowess. He has been scoring more lately, so he's definitely an option at 5'7". The Iowa game, he was pretty masterful in the second half, could not miss. But he's generally going to really be a defensive player who can hit shots. That typical 3-and-D type player. Don't love him. Don't hate him. Fletcher Lawyer, I'm almost never using. He's 5'6". It's an affordable price. Put up 41 against Tennessee. He hasn't really done anything like that since. Just really reliant on his scoring as well. What I want to do is talk about these Purdue value plays, which I think any of these next two names I'm going to talk about are viable, especially if you're going in the non-Edey route. Then you're going to want to try to play Braden Smith, and you're going to want to hope that he gets in foul trouble, which just ain't going to happen in Toronto. But one of his secondary front court players makes things happen. Still feel there's a ton of talent and untapped upside for Trey Kaufman-Renn. Sits there at 4'4". If we get anywhere close to 20 minutes out of him at 4'4", I do think he shatters that price. I think he has a ton of rebounds. Anytime he's off getting a water break, Kaufman-Renn can be very active. So I do like him as a GPP value, somebody who's going to be like a 1% owned play that could definitely pan out. And then, of course, you have the eternal Mason Gillis, who can, when you ask, can you do less with more? You're typically wanting to ask, can you do more with less? But with him, it's the opposite. And he'll sometimes be out there for 30 minutes. And the kids were calling it fit bidding at one point. I don't know what the trendy word is for those who just are running laps around the court. But Gillis is at least logging minutes. He's only 4'1". When you least suspect it, he puts up a good game. He'll hit a couple of threes. He can pay off this 4'1" price tag. It is something that's achievable. He hasn't really done it much this season, but you guys will recall, especially late in the season, last year when pricing gets especially tight, Gillis was somebody at sub 5K we were throwing in there, and he was having 4 or 5x games. He's somebody that Coach Painter's not afraid to use, and he will. So Gillis getting minutes out there at 4'1", it's not the worst move in the world by any means. On the Alabama side, Mark Sears has awoken. Last year, it was a struggle getting acclimated, I think, for him to the SEC. Also, having Brandon Miller around. I mean, it was a transition year for him, but he's clearly got it figured out this year. He's the best player on the team. And now we're seeing, and he doesn't have the time that Sears had, Aaron Estrada struggling to get acclimated to this system. Estrada's price has dropped down to 7.3 because he's been rather ordinary. We're used to him at his Hofstra days putting up 40, 45, 50 fantasy point games on the regular. A 7.3 Aaron Estrada is especially appealing in all formats for me, and I prefer him over Mark Sears because obviously that's a huge discount from 8.7, but he hasn't been showing that explosiveness, but he has been solid. And he's getting to a price where it's almost worth just playing him because even his bad games, he's right around 3x at that price. It's not the end of the world, and the upside is massive for him. We know that. He's still taking a ton of shots. It's not as if he's not getting volume. And this Purdue defense is very good, but we have seen guards, especially scoring guards or upper tier type, like Cam Jones, have pretty nice scoring games against them. He had 17 real against them. So it's not unfathomable to think that Aaron Estrada could have a nice breakout game against this Purdue team. Even when they played Gonzaga, I know their guards ended up sucking in the second half, but in the first half, all of them were scoring at will, and they just got ice cold. So I like Estrada here. His rates are still fantastic. 30% shot rate, highest on the team, 26% usage rate. He's making 45% of his triples. Mark Sears making 52% of his triples, by the way, so they're just scorching the nets. 20% assist rate for Estrada, 3% steal rate. There is a ton to like there. He will play a lot more minutes, too. He's going to have to. So we've been seeing him. There's a blowout game, so he played 27. Played 31 against Clemson. They were pretty well outmatched. 32 against Oregon, 32 against Ohio. he's going to play probably closer to 35, 36 in this one, if not more, especially with Nelson ailing, no Pringle. Like, they're not going to be able to throw like Davin Cosby out there for 10, 15 minutes. He'll just get obliterated. So they're going to have to rely heavily on Sears and Estrada, and that might be an argument for using one of those two in one of your main lineups just because they're going to be on the floor a long time. They are giving more minutes to Latrell Wrightsell, who's 4'9", certainly playable at that price tag. Rylan Griffin at 4'7", who's been starting. He just feels like Jaden Bradley, like this year's Jaden Bradley for Bama, getting those starter minutes, not doing a ton with them. Still pretty raw. They need to unleash Sam Walters, but it's not if he's going to be a banger. He's more of a shooter. So just another guy in this offense that's not going to be able to do much, especially in this point of his career. And defensively, he's not going to give them a lot of help on the giant Toronto native that is Zach Edey. So I guess the main decision is, do you want to play Mo Wag? I don't. I don't really want to play anyone against Edey. And if I'm rostering Edey, the only time I want to use somebody against him is just like that. It's purely strategic that I'm playing the main guy he's going head-to-head against because I'm wanting a bust from him. I'm wanting foul trouble. And if he gets on the bench with foul trouble, then the guy he would have been guarding is probably going off because then Ren Kaufman is trying to do the deed. Brian Waddell is trying to do the deed. Strong last name, by the way. And Caleb First, who just has not worked out as a lot of people thought he would be trying to do the deed. And there's not really any front court players on Alabama's team that I think would be able to even take advantage of a foul trouble game from Zach Edey, honestly. Not having Grant Nelson hurts. Not having Nick Pringle be adequate or disciplined is really going to come back to haunt this Alabama team. So we're on team play Zach Edey. It's horrible. I know it's so anti-me in every way, but so I'm sorry. I'm been talking to somebody about a lineup that I like and he likes, and we all like. we need a 3K player to make it work. So he just gave me a name, but we'll talk about it when we get to the Wisconsin game. All right, Kansas State versus LSU. This should be a fun one. This is your GPP stack that could certainly win you the seat, the jam, whatever they're calling it, the jumper. It's -2 for LSU, 142.5 total. I think the over is live. I think Kansas State money line is live. I might be hungover on Kansas State. I was so drunk with I was high on that team when no one else was last year. They exceeded expectations, and I still felt like they were going to do it again. Love Jerome Tang. Think he's an amazing coach. Think he'll ultimately he's going to end up getting even a bigger job than this. And I thought that the transfer additions that they made were like one for one. Arthur Kaluma coming in, Key Johnson going out, pretty comparable. Tyler Perry coming in, Marquise Noel going out. I felt like pretty comparable, but I think we're quickly seeing they're not the same. Not a knock on Tyler Perry, but he is not as protected as he was at North Texas. Kansas State's defense isn't to the level of North Texas, at least not right now. He's getting a little bit exposed because he's having a hard time. I don't know how many of you have watched Kansas State games. It's really important too, by the way, especially in college basketball. I sometimes need to remind myself of this, but make sure you try to watch some games from time to time. If you get into this box score watching, stat broadcast watching, you're at work and you don't have time to watch it. It's easy to fall into this why didn't Tyler Perry put up 50? Why do you only put up 20 against Villanova? Well, if you would have watched, you'd see he's having a shit hard time getting his shot off for some reason. I don't know. All of a sudden, he's not creating for himself as well. And the defense is just kind of smothering him and he's taking bad shots. And I think you probably guessed that if you just looked at his logs lately. If you watch the games, you see he's just taking bad shots. And it's almost like he's getting frustrated to the point where, they're not going in. He's not contributing as much to the game. And he's sort of panicking. We see it with Jameer Nelson too on TCU. They're not contributing to the game as fast as they want to, and they start taking bad shots, and it's all of a sudden the game gets away from them because Tyler Perry should not be playing 41 minutes and putting up 20 fantasy points. That just should never happen with a player of his caliber. And I was all over him against Villanova. I thought it was a great spot for him. Villanova, to me, is a very weak team. I know a lot of people are high on them coming into it. They can't a single, Big Five team to save their life. Now Justin Morris hurt. Like I just felt like against Nova, he was going to be it, and he got the minutes, but it just didn't pan out, unfortunately. So he's been under 30 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. Something's got to change, and maybe perhaps against this LSU team it does change. But he's going to be on the floor a lot, and he's now priced at 7.5, which is still a very appealing price. He was the posh play of the day, which the first time we unleashed that, and he did not come through. So, he's on probation as far as I'm concerned. But I do like the idea of going back to him. I do think this is a game that will go over what is projected. Ken Palm has a 73-72, actually in favor of Kansas State for what it's worth. I do like them to win this game against LSU, and I think that we see a much better game from Tyler Perry. It helps that Arthur Kaluma is just an eater of worlds right now. He is absolutely dominating. Both of them priced at 7.5. That was a huge game against that Nova front court that he had, hitting jumpers, stepping out, hitting threes. He was just unguardable in that game. And we saw it at times last year on Creighton that he was capable of taking games over. It was just the fact of other guys on Creighton had to get their shots up. They're really balanced group, and he just didn't get the shots that he probably needed to be consistently good. Disappeared from the game too often. No fault of his own. Now he's on a team where, he's trending towards being the alpha, or at least falling into that Key Johnson role from last year, which is a very, very valuable role to be in for both DFS and real life purposes, because it's just a really productive spot in this offense. So I like Kaluma, obviously. 24.2% usage rate. He has a combined rebounding rate of almost 30%, drawing 5 fouls per 40, and shooting 34% from long range on volume, 32 attempts for him. So a pretty dangerous wing right now. Perry playing 86% of the minutes. That's top 80 in the country, available minutes. He is in the game for a long time. He's not coming out. But his usage rate is only 20.9%. His shot rate is only 20.7%. Those are giant dips from where he was last year at North Texas. Still playing almost every available minute last year at North Texas. That hasn't changed. But his usage rate was 25%. His shot rate was 26, almost 27%. And he was shooting 42% from long range as well. He's 4th best in the conference last year when he played for North Texas. And that was in the mighty CUSA, for those wondering. Now he's down to 32%. His usage rate's taken a giant hit. His assist rate has gone way up, so he is playing a slightly different role, and they're trying to almost pigeonhole him into the Marquise Noel role, which obviously he was amazing, and he's capable of scoring at a high level. He's capable of getting others involved. I mean, he had one of the best assist rates in the country last year. He's not that same type of player. I do think as the season goes on, they'll rely on Perry more. But part of the other issue there is the fact that Cam Carter is he's playing the best basketball of his career. His shot rate is almost 28%. And it's just another scorer that's kind of, necessitating this decline in Perry's production. So you have Perry missing shots, struggling to get shots off, Cam Carter scoring at a high level, a career high level, and Arthur Kaluma finally taking a alpha-like role in his career. So there's a lot of negatives for Tyler Perry. We may see his price even tumble down lower. If it gets any lower than 7.5, like, I don't care how mediocre he's playing, I'm just probably never fading him under 7K ever, regardless of opponent. So keeping an eye on Perry. I don't think anyone rosters him. If people are paying for a K-State guy, they're probably going with Carter because he's been red hot, or Kaluma coming off the big game. A lot of people look at those logs and see that Perry's on the decline, but this spot for him against LSU, I do think he can do well, but they're going to need to find ways to get him more quality looks, because right now it's forcing those shots up, isn't it? Nate Tomlin gone, kicked off the team, or removed from the program. Came out that he got into some serious violent bar fights. strangely enough, in this world that we live in now, he's apparently he hit the transfer portal, but he's apparently like eligible now because I think he graduates in a week, and they're saying that he would be eligible to play immediately. I don't know that that would be true. I think the beat that put that out might be a little confused because that's never happened before. But if it is, that really opens up a can of worms that even I am a little uncertain about. I love transfers. I love the free agency aspect to this, but if you're able to play for 2 programs in 1 year, that might cause some issues. So I'm not quite too sure what's happening there with Nate Tomlin. You do have a cheap starter and Day Aim, still super raw. Been struggling lately. He's also a guy who couldn't really get his shot off in that last game. Probably not too high on him at 4.7, but again, somebody who's getting those minutes. Will McNair's there at 5K. He's been playing a lot more minutes now, especially with Tomlin gone. That role is going to be his. He rebounds at a pretty solid level, can score a little bit, and he's been able to log some big minutes. 3 of his last 5 games, he's been over 25 minutes there at 5K. Somebody who could definitely do well in a matchup like this. Still always keeping my eye on Jarrell Colbert, who has a ton of upside, doesn't get consistent minutes, has a lot of actual talent, super raw. If you believe in revenge narratives, he did start his career at LSU as a freshman where he played 4 games. Probably won't get enough minutes to matter, but there's somebody there. LSU, can we play Will Baker at 7.2? Probably not. Will Baker just tortures the DFS community. How about that Syracuse performance, huh? 6.5 fantasy points in 16 minutes at 6.4. That one really stung, but he was like 82% owned that day, so it didn't matter. I think that was a smaller slate, but Will Baker's the quintessential roster him. He tanks you, fade him, he goes ballistic. 7.2 is a pretty high price. I'm a little uncomfortable with that one. I do feel like foul trouble is inevitable in a matchup like this. If he can have a game like he did against North Texas or Dayton in the MTE event where he's playing over 30 minutes, he is definitely viable. But do you really want to hitch your wagon to a over 7K Will Baker? Probably not. The main values that we've been having on this team was Baker when he was 4K, but Jalen Reed, Tyler L. Ward, both have been playing really good minutes. Quality minutes has caused their prices to balloon. Tyrell Ward at 5.2, probably a bit priced out there. And then Jalen Reed has been playing over 30 minutes in 3 of his last 4. It's caused his price to balloon towards 6K. He has scored 22 plus DK points in 3 of his last 4 as well. A couple of big rebounding games against Syracuse, 11 boards against North Florida, 9. 5.8's a little bit of a tough price, but there is some talent and some quality fantasy point per minute players on this team. This is just a really nice GPP look where I think a mini game stack of this could end up winning you some significant change because I don't know that a lot of people will be on it. The freshman, Mike Williams, minutes were non-existent there against Syracuse. Believe he's banged up to a degree as well. So we'll see what happens if he comes back to a significant role. Let's see what the LSU starters were in the – okay. Mwani Wilkinson was back in the starting lineup last game, played 18 minutes, did nothing predictably. Jordan Wright off the bench, 21. Carlos Stewart, 17. And then Mike Williams did play and was better. But everybody on this LSU team is kind of, I think off the main team list for now, and really heavily on the GPP side and higher up on the priority list for me in this game as well. If ever there was a game on this slate to go to overtime, it would be this one. All right, Auburn versus Indiana. This is a battle of 2 really strong interior players. Auburn is 6.5 point favorites. It's a total of 147. DK is really not. They're just throwing like every total at 145 to 148. They're just really kind of going all in on that total. With Auburn, it is a Tough decision, I think, to play my man Janai Broom. He has been absolutely murderous the last two slates. Made me feel bad because I didn't use him against Virginia Tech, although I liked him a lot there. The fact that Coach Pearl jerks him around minutes-wise, there was talk about him having, various nicks and banged up and sore this, and it's just really tough to pay these exorbitant prices for a guy that just never gets 30 minutes or more. But his efficiency level is so high that he can absolutely detonate against anyone. Very strong GBP look, as always. You're not getting him, obviously, in any ED lineups at that price. The Indiana defense, I think, you look at it on paper, it certainly has legs, but when you watch them in the games, they're not really shutting anyone down, right? The Connecticut game, giving up almost 80 to them. Donovan Clingan owned the glass, didn't score a lot, but he was cleaning up on the glass. Tristan Newton was scoring at will. This Hoosiers defense is really not going to scare anyone. They got to scare themselves from Louisville. They had a hard time putting away Sky Clark and company. Michigan, they held off 78-75. Malik Renew had a pretty nice game. Not Malik Renew. Oliver Mqua had a pretty nice game, 18 real, 5 rebounds. Doug McDaniel did not have a nice game. They actually sold out to stop him, and then the interior really went off. So I do think Janai Broom has legs in this matchup. The foul trouble bug is always there. This is also a quote-unquote neutral court game taking place in Atlanta. So that's far less neutral for the Hoosiers than it is Auburn. But I like Broom, always high upside. The rest of Auburn, it's difficult to use. Jalen Williams, minutes also going to spike and decline almost at a Coach Pearl's win. The real value is with these sub 6K guys. Chad Baker, who's had some good games. Aiden Holloway, who has massive, massive upside, but is super raw and is on a team that I don't know he's going to get the kind of nourishment that he needs initially. He's going to get tough quick, no doubt about that. But he's going through some really struggles shooting the basketball right now. Trey Donaldson, who I love. Denver Jones, who is struggling to acclimate to the team. Trey Donaldson's there at 4-5. If we could know for certain that he was going to play anywhere over 20 minutes, I would say at 4-5, I'm in. I think Trey Donaldson is one of the most overlooked and underrated players, not only on the Auburn program, but maybe in the SEC. Coming out of high school, I mean, this kid was talked about a lot, and it hasn't quite worked out for him, but he has major upside. And if we could ever get to a point where he was playing a 30-minute role, he is just super detonating. Shooting 44% from long range, has an assist rate of almost 40%, so he can run the offense, he can shoot, has a usage rate over 21%. Please give him more minutes. He got a spot start against Alabama A&M. He was very solid in that spot start. He had 2 starts in the beginning of the season, one of which was against Baylor. Baylor's just, they're destroyers, so that wasn't the most ideal spot for him. His freshman season, he played sparingly, mostly 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. So, coming into it with the game against Baylor, he got smacked, played 13 minutes, and quickly got taken out of the starting lineup. But he has looked good recently, and especially that Appalachian State game and the game against Virginia Tech. He had some clutch baskets and was very comfortable. So I am angling for Trey Donaldson to play more, but I know how Coach Pearl is. Nothing's going to change his rotation since he's been in Auburn. He's going to rotate. You get involved with Trey Donaldson, Chaney Johnson's going to be the one that plays 25 minutes and puts up 30. You go Chaney Johnson, then Katie Johnson is going to show his face, and there'd be no reason to play Katie Johnson. He's 3'8". We know the guy can score. He has never met a shot he doesn't like. He's a volume guy. If he played 25 minutes, he'd be great. But he played 8 minutes in their last one. He played 12 before that. He played 12 before that. You're not touching Katie Johnson. But would it really shock you if Katie Johnson played 28 minutes against Indiana? No, it wouldn't. So it's tough to really justify anyone that isn't Janai Broom, but it's also a 9-3 price point. Honestly, Chad Baker should probably be playing 30 minutes a night. Trey Donaldson should be playing 30 minutes a night. Denver Jones probably shouldn't be playing at all. And then you can have Chaney and Katie splitting the minutes at the other guard spot. Aiden Holloway playing maybe some out of position, 4 or something. And then Jalen Williams, almost like him coming off the bench. But that would be my rotation. But, I'm not a D1 coach. I don't pretend to be one. I'm pretty comfortable here on this chair barking orders, though, in case anyone was wondering. Indiana, Kel Ware, just let's take a shot at Oregon. All the respect in the world for that program. They do things the right way. Uncle Phil's a great guy to have in your corner with Nike. But, man, who lets this kid walk away? And is it a Dana Altman issue? Is it a meddling issue from donors? I mean, how do you let Kel Ware walk out of there? Goes to Indiana where he just absolutely destroys. God, he's good. I don't know if he's 9-1 good on this slate against Auburn, but he's really good. A luxury play to be certain. Kel Ware was, that's my house. The tables have turned. He's gone from a hardly ever used value to a luxury play in the blink of an eye. Super strong rates across the board, 27.5% defensive rebounding rate, 26% shot rate. He has a block rate over 6%, draws 5 fouls per 40. He does not have a high foul rate himself, so we love that for a 7-footer. Super athletic, agile, versatile, not getting saddled with fouls. Keep that up. And he's shooting 50% from long range. Granted, he's only take 10 attempts, but he's a 7-footer. And that's what you want to say. I'm kind of angling for Edey. Like, he doesn't have to shoot a lot of volume. Clearly, he can hit shots. It's enough to make defenders think twice about leaving him open out there, right? So love Kel Ware. Malik Renew, I think most of us thought last year that he had a chance to be really good quickly. Showed those flashes his freshman season. And he has turned himself into a really, really nice player quickly. Like, the instant chemistry that's been built between Kel Ware and Malik Renew has been something to really, look at with admiration and like just awe. Those two play together so well. You'd think that they had been playing together since they were like 5 years old. Really, really strong across the board stats for Renew. He leads the team in usage at 27.4%, leads the team in shot rate at 26%. He has the highest assist rate outside of course, Xavier Johnson, whose assist rate isn't actually that high this year at 21.8%, has a block rate of 5.3% himself. Also not a big fouler, although it does happen. And he's drawing 5 fouls per 40. Not the 3-point shooter that Kel Ware is, but he's only taken 6 attempts, made 1. I like him quite a bit. I look at this Auburn team and how they're going to potentially defend Indiana, and I think it's actually favorable for Indiana, even though I do like Auburn to win this game, I think. I foresee them having difficulties with this Indiana Hoosiers front court. And to a lesser degree, Mackenzie Mbako at 5'5", I know he's coming off a dud against Michigan. He's also got to be in consideration here because his minutes are up. He looks a lot more comfortable. Starting out the season, he looked totally lost, befuddled on defense. They couldn't even use him very much, and he's turned that around quickly. In less than a month, he's a guy that they can rarely take off the floor. So there is a lot of versatility here. I wonder if Auburn's going to end up having to play a guy like Dylan Cardwell more. Maybe perhaps Chris Moore's going to have to log more minutes. And if that's the case, these guys like Renew and Mbako and Ware even are GPP winners, because none of those guys like Cardwell, who's just a foul machine himself, would be able to check a player like Malik Renew. 6'7" is a really nice price. I think it's a sneaky price for him. It's a lot more attainable than it is for Kel Ware, who's 9'1". We've been playing Mbako, in this mid-5 range and sub-5K range for a couple of slates in a row. Don't mind going back to him if you want to go that route. I think people are going to overlook Indiana and underlook Auburn, if that makes sense. Trey Galloway's there at 5'4". He's been the main benefactor of XJ being hurt. playing 30 minutes, taking a ton of shots, but there's a lot of empty minutes there for Trey Galloway. I don't know that I could ever really get there above 5K. CJ Gunn played 20 minutes against Michigan, had a big game. He's 4K. If CJ Gunn's in a 15 to 20 minute role now, that makes him somewhat interesting. They've given these minutes to Gabe Cupps, who's been starting, but he's got that low fantasy point per minute number. Over the last 3 games, 21, 24, and 32 minutes, but he's only hit double-digit fantasy points once, and he failed to register even 5 fantasy points in one of those 3 as well. So I would like to see less minutes for Gabe Cupps, who he doesn't shoot at all, and more minutes for CJ Gunn. Or hell, I'd even like to see our old friend Anthony Walker, who I swear to you used to be good 3 years ago. Nobody believes me. Nobody can seem to remember. But he's been seeing a little bit of a boost off the bench here lately. And at 3.8, this is a spot against Auburn where I could see him doing well. If one of the McKenzie, Malik, Kell trio there gets into foul trouble, additional minutes go Walker's way, I wouldn't be shocked to see him actually pay off there. So I do like this game as well as a game stack, or even just 1 or 2 pieces from it. All right, we got to kick it on here. Louisville versus DePaul, the game that you didn't know you needed, but now you do. It's what's up, Andres? Yep, I'm going to speed through these last couple of DFS games, and then we'll look at the betting side. I will be back tomorrow morning early as well to talk more about the betting side. So if you have some more questions that you didn't get answered tonight, then you can tune in the morning and we'll work through those. Tomorrow's going to be literally a question and answer session for anything that you guys have. All right, Louisville versus DePaul. It's bad. Both programs are bad. Now, I said to many people that Notre Dame might be worse than Louisville, and a lot of people said nobody can be worse than Louisville, and then they watched Notre Dame play, and now people are starting to come around that actually they might be worse than Louisville. This game is a pick'em, so you can, if you got a real strong read one way or the other, and you got the testicular fortitude of one Nick Foley, I might bet on this game for fun. I don't like to bet games just to bet games. I like to actually have a real strong read one way or another. But how do you not get action on a game like this? The total is 148. You want to see 2 inept programs play. This is it. DePaul is like, when does this program turn into a D2 at this point? They're 1-7. Tony Stubblefield is probably on his way out. DePaul won a game against South Dakota that I never thought they would. For any game that DePaul was favored so far this year, I've just bet the other side blindly, and it's worked all but one time. This is a real bad team. The Texas A&M game, really just a microcosm of what this season has already turned into. Texas A&M was they were scoring, 2.21 points per minute or some like crazy stat. And they figured out, like, if DePaul would have literally just like laid down and let them score, they would have given up less points than they actually did. Mind melting how bad this DePaul team is. So, and we know Louisville's bad, but Louisville's actually given some games to people, and they have at least at times looked adequate. Like the Virginia Tech loss, I thought they came away from that one looking somewhat decent. They beat New Mexico State in overtime, looking decent. The Texas game, they looked fine. Like that might be worse on Texas than it is good for Louisville. And we know Coach Kenny Payne's going to have one hilarious quote for us at the end of the game, whichever way this ends, win or lose. I'd almost prefer a loss against DePaul because I just know he's going to say some of the dumbest stuff we've ever heard. But looking at it from a DFS perspective, Louisville guys, I think are price probably where I'm comfortable with. Brandon Huntley Hatfield, I know he just played 38 minutes and against a Virginia Tech front court that he had no business even being on the court that long. I would have thought he'd foul out and was adequate. He's probably my least favorite play as a whole, but this matchup against DePaul is so good for front court players. Good for everyone, let's be honest, but his position in particular, if he's going to play anywhere close to those minutes at 6'1", he's such a good tournament forward play, somebody who could win you a seat. And that's the only time this year you'll hear me utter the words Brandon Huntley Hatfield could win you a seat. They just a really good spot for him to do so. The price is relatively strong as well. Typically, we have seen Sky Clark and Trey White do the majority of the damage for this team. Sky Clark has a 26% usage rate, 25% shot rate, while Trey White has a 24% usage rate and a 22% shot rate. The freshman Tyler Johnson, strong assist rate, 32%, a 26% usage rate. He has been playing quite well in the minutes he gets off the bench. He apparently has the tights thing going on. I believe that was him. But he's somebody who at 4.9 is at least adequate in this spot. If he were to jump into the starting lineup at any point, sub 5K, I would be interested at 4.9. No doubt about it. Not as interested in the almost 7K prices for these guys, but it is a matchup against DePaul. Trey White's going to get minutes. He's going to get volume. Sky Clark is getting volume as well. It's almost the perfect situation for Sky Clark. Say what you will about him, but he's on a team that is allowing him to chuck. And he is not only chucking, but he's doing a fantastic job of initiating contact. He is getting to the foul line a lot, and he's racking up points at the line, drawing 6 fouls per 40, has a really high free throw rate. You see there's been a couple of games there. The New Mexico State game, which went to OT, 15 of 16, 7 of 9 against Indiana, 7-8 against Virginia Tech. So he's almost a safe bet because of the free throw shooting that he does get. But he hasn't had many upside games necessarily at this price either. So he's just an okay play for me at this rate. On the DePaul side, Chico Carter is assumed the, de facto high usage, high scoring, high shot taking role that DePaul has had the last couple of years. My man Javon Freeman Liberty had that spot a few years ago. Emoja Gibson operated in that spot last year. Now it's all Chico Carter all the time at this point. He does have a fairly strong shot rate at over 20%. He's making 44% of his long range jumpers, 26% assist rate. Overall, he's the guy here for DePaul that you would generally want to roster if you want somebody. And 6'4" is a reasonable price for him. He is the one DePaul guy that I think you could come away with in your main lineup and feel like I got my lineup in with a potentially optimal guy. I don't feel that way about Elijah Fisher, who at 5'4", I'd like to see that price come down. I certainly don't feel that way about Deshaun Nelson, who has been playing better lately, but that's only a matter of time before he doesn't. He has a very high foul rate, and he ends up playing way less minutes than he needs to. 5'8's an intriguing price for him. There's upside there, but the question is, can he keep his hands to himself enough to actually log 30 minutes again instead of 15? And then Jeremiah Odin, who his price was way out of whack to start. Just a role play 3-and-D type guy. Still not going to pay 6-1 for him, but he's taking a ton of shots for this DePaul team too, because there's no one telling them not to. Whether they're good shots or not, they're taking it. Caleb Murphy's still extremely cheap at 3.8, but I think the ship may have sailed on our guy Caleb Murphy, and that is a sad realization for me. Wisconsin versus Arizona, and this is a Wisconsin team that looked very, very good. And again, obviously against Marquette, every time you go to write them off, they turn around and do something good. And this is a team that has, not lost since early November now against Providence. And they lost that game early against Tennessee that they were in. Marquette, it seemed like they were never in danger there, won that 175-64. And then the Michigan State game, it ended up the scores ended up being respectable in both of those, but they were never in danger of losing either of those games. Now they're playing a very tough Arizona team. Ken Pom has a 78-72, so fully in the game. A spot where I don't know how much I believe in this Arizona team just yet. They certainly are good. Their coaching staff is good. Now, they're 9.5-point favorites on DK. It's a 145 total. There's that total again. They just throw 145, 147 on every game. I do think they have a chance to be in this. And we nailed AJ Storr last game. He had his breakout finally against Michigan State. 29 minutes, 22 real points, 31 fantasy points. Price has jumped up almost 1K to 5.7. I do advise we probably reel it back on him. And I think we literally just play it like the stock market with him. Every time he comes off a bad game and he drops back under 5K, we'll just jam him in. Goes back over closer to 6K, we'll back off. We'll just seesaw with him all year round. But I do like AJ Storr, especially when he's playing those kind of minutes, but he is super reliant on his shot. And we've seen him do it earlier in the season, that Providence game, right? The first half, we had like 3. We had his PRA. We bet his PRA all the time, over 17.5. He had like 3 at halftime in Providence. And it was like, well, that one lost. And then he ends up just obliterating the second half. He is a very streaky volume guy, still raw, still a lot of developing to go. Love AJ Storr. I don't think I'm really on any of these Wisconsin guys, though, besides him. John Blackwell, also some intrigue at 4.9. His price starting to drop a little bit. Minutes are pretty solid, but this just isn't the greatest matchup in the world for Wisconsin. I do want to see for both teams. It's a good litmus test for both. I think Connor Essegian is probably going to be hitting the portal, right? I don't know if he's long for this world with Wisconsin. It's just not getting minutes at all. And there is a name that came across my phone just a few minutes ago. Nolan Winter as the 3K forward. Can we get 3X from him? And I would have to ask, Razzle's a Wisconsin guy. I would have to say, maybe. Can we get 10 minutes out of Nolan Winter? Possibly. I hate these slates when I'm looking at guys like Nolan Winter, and because I always do better when I have a more balanced approach and I'm not trying to take a shot with a guy like this, because inevitably Edey's going to give me 32 tomorrow, and then Winter's going to, of course, get 4, if that, and then it's just going to be a disaster. But it's come to that for me, folks. I'm considering Nolan Winter at 3K because I need a 3K forward, and the guys played a common, less than 30 minutes in the past 3 games combined. So that's where we're at. Arizona has really, really affordable prices across the board. Once we get into Pac-12 play, I have a feeling we're going to be talking about and using Arizona guys a lot. They probably won't be cheap for long as they get into Pac-12 play, though. So we have to, kind of utilize it while we can. Omar Ballo, his 6'7", his price was super high last year. We know under Coach Lloyd, they develop talented bigs. Ballo is a guy that once we get into conference play, I think will start to take off even further. They'll rely on him more. He's always a nice GPP look. Caleb Love at 6'8". We know what he can bring. He has scored 30-plus fantasy points in 4 straight contests. Don't look now, but Caleb Love has found himself a home. He's comfortable. He's making shots, and he's a big-time DFS factor right now. So I don't know where we're at 6'8". Like, you'll have a big, tough decision to make. Maybe you're not with me on Jameer Watkins. Maybe you're not in on Dalton Connect, and that's fine if you're not. If you're not, I almost feel like you might have to play Caleb Love, even against a Wisconsin team that has shown themselves to be a very scrappy group, capable of containing high-level players. Keshad Johnson at 6'4", I think he's a bit rugged for this Wisconsin team. If he doesn't get into foul trouble, I think he could actually put up a really nice score. I don't have any issues with him either. This has been a really good stop for him transferring over from the Final Four appearance with San Diego State. He has seen his usage, shot, and rebounding rates go up across the board. He's shooting 30% from long range as well, which is a tick up from where he usually is. And he is drawing more fouls, fouling less, and he has a much higher block and steal rate. So everything about Keshad Johnson has improved since coming to Arizona. They're putting him in a position to succeed. Pele Larson, one of the highest offensive ratings on the team so far this year. He is a really confusing play at times because he will just have a game where he reaches relentlessly and fouls out quickly. And you'll get just a bum of a game from him. But anytime he's under 6K, he's definitely in play. He's not one of the primary offensive options on this team, but he's definitely a worthwhile look at the 5-5. My initial lineup started with him as a last guy in. I didn't like that, so I got away from it. But if if it was a situation where I was up against it and I had to make a decision now, I would be fine. I would use him over KJ Lewis, even though I think KJ Lewis is going to be better and is better already. Minutes are the difference there. Kylan Boswell, if you can get up to him at 5'8", he's the ultimate play of the group. He's awesome. God, he's so fun to watch. Stares down people after making threes. He's just a really fun player. Getting a lot of shot volume recently. Looks like a big-time leader of this team for the next few years. Shooting 55% from long range. Just a gritty player and somebody who is very, very dangerous from long range. So I like him as well. And then you've got Jaden Bradley there, who's still kind of in that Alabama secondary role. I mean, he's just raw. Maybe he figures it out, but they're at least allowing him the time to figure it out. And when they have Caleb Love on the team, they don't have to press him. So I know the cheap price of 3.8 on Bradley might be like, I know that name, but he's really not there just yet. And then the other youngster, Motias Krivas at 5'9", high fantasy point per minute type play. If ever there was a guy who may jump into the, primary alpha Azulis Tubelis role, it would be him. Krivas is a guy that I think is going to be on the come up. And as we get into conference play, we may even see him more. Highest usage rate on the team at 25%. One of the highest shot rates, not the, but one of, at 22.5%. A 30% combined rebounding rate, 7% block rate, draws almost 7 fouls per 40. There's a lot to like about Krivas. He's a 7'2", 270-pound kid. Just a mammoth, a Lithuanian, which is a Tommy Lloyd special. And it would not surprise me to see him turn into a Tubelis-type performer sooner rather than later. All right, 3 more games. TCU versus Clemson. We are looking at a game here. I think it's time to really respect Clemson's defense from a DFS perspective and targeting. This is a pick'em per DK, 149.5 total. Ooh, they stepped up over the 147. Look at them. I don't want to target against Clemson very often. I've kind of said that the last few Clemson slates, and people have kind of given me the side eye, like, what do you mean Clemson? They're coached by Brad Brownell. They're not an elite D. But that the South Carolina game, I ended up playing Miles Stute. Silly me. He did nothing as expected. Michi Johnson still scored at a high level, but he's got a lot of volume. He was just gang banging from long range, 6 of 10. But they did a nice job containing BJ Mack. Talon Cooper was a non-factor. Nobody else on South Carolina did anything. It just became the Michi Johnson show, and Clemson was perfectly fine with that. You look at the game against Pittsburgh, it became the Blake Hinson show. He scored 27 real, but they did a real nice job on everyone else. They made Ish Leggett kind of a non-existent factor. He ended up getting some free throws late, which pushed his points up. Carlton Carrington, the freshman, he never really got going either. Shot 5 for 17. They just allowed one guy to detonate, and they contained the rest of the lineup. And nobody on the bench for Pittsburgh scored a single point. Then you look at Alabama. They won 85-77. Mark Sears had himself a good game. He's been crushing it. They contained everybody off the bench. Aaron Estrada had 16. Grant Nelson had 14. It was not a good game overall for Estrada. Sears was the only one really in the second half that was scoring. And fantasy-wise, Estrada ended up with 20, right? 20-22. So this Clemson team, no, they're not a lockdown. I think when you say we don't want to target a team, people are automatically thinking they're going to hold them to 0. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But if they're holding these 8, 9K, upper tier players, or they're holding guys to, don't even have to worry about price, to sub 20 fantasy points, 3x returns, 2.5x returns, it's just not a team that I'm looking to get involved against. And TCU is a squad that I've stacked more than any other team this year already. We're only a month and a half into the season, and I can tell you that every TCU slate that we've had, I have mini stacked the hell out of this group. Now, they haven't played a particularly great non-con schedule. Georgetown's really the only worthwhile name on it, and that just kind of shows you something. And Georgetown almost beat them. So kudos to Ed Cooley. Maybe Jamie Nixon's group Dixon's group isn't as good as I thought. They're untested. This game being a pick-em seems kind of silly to me. I think Clemson wins, and I think Clemson wins handily. And I don't mean by 20, but I think they win by 8 to 10, and I don't know how close it'll actually be. This game is also in Toronto. TCU's playing at the 19th fastest tempo. They do have a top 30 defense. TCU, that is. Clemson has a top 40 defense, and they're playing at a 260th tempo. So kind of a clash of styles there. TCU has been mainly their starters, which are Emmanuel Miller, Jacoby Coles, Micah Peavy, Jameer Nelson, and then obviously Ernest Udoh, but he ends up losing minutes to Xavier Cork, Mustafa, and Chuck O'Bannon. Like, they rotate that fifth spot. Then Avery Anderson ends up coming in. They run a small, like, 3-guard lineup. Avery Anderson, Jameer Nelson, Micah Peavy. They roll with Miller as an undersized center and Jacoby Coles kind of intermittently as well. And that's worked for them. That's worked really quite well. Going up against Clemson, I don't know how well that's going to work. They're going to need some minutes out of Uday and Mustafa, I think, here. But looking at the TCU side, Emmanuel Miller, we had him at some low ownership last time. He had put up a monster against Georgetown, finally had that breakout game. He is one of my favorite, him and Jameer Nelson. Like, Nelson's just one of my guys. Like, you know how I am with guards like Jameer Nelson. I just love those guys. But Emmanuel Miller is probably my favorite team on this, or favorite player on this team. 8-1 is a price that nobody's going to look at. The most expensive on TCU. Like, he's a great GPP look because I do think he can still do well. And when I look at this roster and how Clemson has played teams, allowing one player to kind of detonate and just containing everybody else, I do feel like Miller has that Blake Hinson game where Hinson poured in almost 30 real points. Miller's already shown capability of doing that. Play a similar position, play a similar play style. I really feel like Miller could have a nice monster game, and everybody else on TCU has a pretty lackluster game. And we've seen that already from TCU in other games where they end up blowing an opponent out. One guy goes off. They've been a really hard stack. Even though I keep stacking them, their stack hasn't necessarily been paying off. So I do like Miller as that kind of TCU one-off. If not him, 1K less to Jacoby Coles at 7-1. Coles has that high fantasy point per minute number. Now that he's playing up closer to 30 minutes, finally had a competitive game against an opponent with the pulse in Georgetown. He played 30. Going up against Clemson, we can expect him to play 30 to 35. And with his high fantasy point per minute total, he's liable to put up 40 with those kind of minutes. But if he's not the one that Clemson kind of just lets roam, he gets contained, then that play's going to blow up in our face. I do like him more for a GPP angle as well. The guards on this TCU team, Micah Peavy at 6'4" has legs for sure. But I think that might be a little bit priced out in this particular matchup. Jameer Nelson, we've already seen him disappear at times before. He explodes in other spots, but at 7'2", I think it's just a little bit too priced up for me. He's kind of similar to Tyler Perry in that he should be putting up a lot more higher level games than he has so far. And a lot of that might just have to do with getting acclimated to your current situation after transferring. But it's kind of tough to pay that price for him just yet. And Avery Anderson has not looked like the Oklahoma State version of himself. So even though the 6K price point may seem a little bit reasonable to you, it's just not quite there yet. On the Clemson side, going up against this TCU team, PJ Hall, our guy, he's worth paying up for. Absolutely. We're not going to be able to do so if you're playing Edey, but if you're running multiple lineups, you got to keep plugging him in there. When a down game for PJ Hall is 37, you just know what level he's playing at. He is fantastic rates across the board. He's just so good. Absolutely love PJ Hall, but obviously priced up very much. Got to be realistic about our chances to actually roster him. Joey Girard has turned into the high volume scorer that he was at Syracuse. Didn't take him long to get that role here for Clemson. He's fine as a GPP look. We were heavy on Chase Hunter last slate, 5.5. He did pay off against South Carolina. Now his price creeps to 5.7. Still in play. You get that, last man in vibes or a 5 to 6K range play. I do still like Chase Hunter. Has a high assist rate. Still taking plenty of shots. Still plays plenty of minutes. He is a good option there. With Alex Hemingway, out long term, it sounds like. And Jack Clark just habitually hurt. I think he lives his life hurt, dealing with the groin issue that's kept him out of the last game or two. It's led to Chauncey Wiggins, who has major upside to not only start games, but play accelerated minutes. 27 minutes against South Carolina, 30 against Pittsburgh. He has taken 19 shots in the past 2 games. I think at this point, it's going to lead to Brownell having to find ways to play Wiggins more, even when they get healthy and guys return. He has been way too good. Priced at 4.3. He was very chalky against South Carolina at 3.7. Kind of figured he would be. He's a forward, cheap value forward. This is another cheap spot for him. I do like his chances against this TCU team of not only producing, but also contributing in other categories besides just scoring. But he's been kind of a sniper lately from long range. But I think he ends up contributing in other categories like rebounds, like assists, and is going to end up being a key player for this team by the time it's all said and done. And as we get into next year and PJ Hall is gone, we might be talking about, an 8K Chauncey Wiggins. So enjoy this cheap price on him while you still can. And he's definitely a upper tier value for me on this slate. Richmond versus Florida. I love this Florida team. They're 10.5 point favorites. We got 152.5 total. I absolutely love the way Florida plays. I love the way that this team is built. Walter Clayton is probably up there as one of my favorite. He's definitely on the first team all Waltz guys early in the season. Priced at 8.2. It's fair. It's reasonable. I'm probably not there with him, but he has been such a good low-owned play at times this year. The game against Pittsburgh, he went ballistic. That was one that we ended up on him. That one had a kind of a lackluster pay-up group, so we ended up using Clayton, and he paid off handsomely. He has been priced way up ever since, and he's performed okay. Not great, just okay. I'd like to see it come down a little bit more, but I do think he's absolutely in play at 8.2. Tyrese Samuel has been fantastic in his role with Florida, but he's priced way up there at 7.9. We'll need to see that come down. Zion Pullen, since becoming eligible, healthy, he's contributing large minutes. His prices come down a little bit to 7.1. I think once we get into the 6K, mid 6K range with him, that's when we start really talking about him being a main team play. And it comes down to the guy that last time Florida was on the slate, which was not the blowout win over Merrimack, but against Wake Forest, which is a defense that we know can be absolutely against. We were all over Riley Kugel at 6'6". He was relatively high owned. Had a kind of a lackluster start to the game, went takeover mode in the second half. They did end up losing that game, but he put up 32 for us. Now his price still there at 6'6". I'm very aware that Clayton, Samuel, Pullen, it's going to be hard to get those prices with the pay-ups that we're intending to use. I think getting exposure to Florida is the way to go. I often do whenever they're on the slate, and the best way to do that for me, once again, is through Riley Kugel at 6'6". I think this is going to be one where maybe he isn't as high owned as he's been in some of the past slates. Richmond is a team that does have some individual on-ball defenders that can frustrate guys, but overall they're not to the level of Florida, and I think Kugel and Clayton have really nice games here. Florida playing at the 20th fastest tempo in the country as well. They are really pushing the pace. Their offensive efficiency is sky high. They're rebounding at a high level. There's just a lot to like about this group. And Kugel is definitely my favorite. 26% shot rate, one of the highest on the team, 37% from long range. Let's have ourselves another big game here. Riley. Alex Condon, who is the almost 7-foot freshman from Australia, was on a final 2 of St. Mary's in Florida, decided to go to Florida, has a 25% usage rate, a combined rebounding rate that is going to be approaching 40% at this rate, 5% block rate, drawing 6 fouls per 40. He's even knocking down 37% of his threes on 11 attempts. For a 7-footer, 11 attempts through 8 games. Agreeable. He got his opportunity to start playing more when Micah hand-logged in the Marshall transfer. Ended up getting hurt against Pittsburgh, missed the last 2 games, got back against Merrimack. They played him 4 minutes. He was not himself at all. It looks like Condon, even if Handlogden ends up, healthy quickly, it seems like they're going to take it slow with him. Condon may end up being a guy who works his way into the starting lineup, or it's just going to be a 25-minute per game guy, whether he's on the bench or starting. There was a lot of murmurs coming into the season from Florida Beats and coaching staff alike that Condon was pushing for a starting spot. They planned on taking it slow with him, but he's just been so very good. They're not sure that they can. His price it's too high at 6'3" for us to seriously consider, but especially coming off the 40, and it was a blowout against Merrimack. But do not be surprised if his minutes start to level off at the mid-20s range, or even start approaching 30 in matchups that are competitive like this. You see the Pittsburgh game, they ended up really needing him because obviously Handlogden went down 1 minute in, played 24 minutes. He put up 24 fantasy points. So Alex Condon is somebody to keep your eye on for the foreseeable future. And then Thomas Hoff, who is another youngster sitting there at 4.9. He's been seeing more minutes lately as well. Somebody as a GPP type shot, but 4.9, we're not getting the biggest discount, but there are a lot of pieces to like for this Florida team. I am very much involved on Riley Kugel. Richmond tends to be Jordan King or nothing for me. Isaiah Bigelow has shown flashes in the past. I know that a lot of people like to use Neil Quinn, but Quinn at almost 8K, it's kind of uncomfortable for me. To me, he's just like a 20, 25 fantasy point per game guy. I know he's had bigger games, but I would need to see it against Florida before I really considered paying almost 8K for him. There is one player in particular for this Richmond team that I do feel is main team viable, not only because of price, but minutes are there. He is seeing a spike in usage shots across the board. DG Bailey, whose price has crept up slowly. He's now 4.9, has scored 20-plus DK points in 4 of his last 5 games. Absolutely somebody that we can look at. Not a priority value, I don't think, but I do like him quite a bit. You look in the game against Northern Iowa, they're starting Jason Roche, who is 3K, by the way, and I know this because he was one of the 3K guys that I was looking at. Low usage guy, played 16 minutes as a starter. DJ Bailey comes in, ends up assuming the starting role, basically just coming off the bench while doing so, and then he closes the game out. Higher rates, better overall player. He doesn't have like high usage rates by any means, but he's just got a lot more going for him, especially lately. Much better defender, has a steal rate of almost 3.5%, has knocked down 50% of his threes. I think we start to see Bailey play more and more and probably even get himself into the starting lineup more as we go on and close to conference play as well. But if you look at his minutes, he's been consistently playing upper 20s, lower 30s. So there is definitely merit to using DJ Bailey, even as a non-starter. You look at the Roche play at 3K, has been starting 16 minutes against William Mary, 26, 13, 18, 13. Can he get us 12? Can he get us 12? Maybe get 18.5 against William Mary. So it's definitely possible, but I just hate that. I hate the thought of that. And then we close out with Arkansas versus Oklahoma. Got to give it up to Porter Moser. He has this Sooners team absolutely cooking. Now, coming into the Iowa game, I said, obviously, Iowa, they're not very good, but Oklahoma hasn't played anybody. I need to see them beat a decent team. And they did beat Iowa. Then they came back and they beat USC. They had a gimme against Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and then they dominated against Providence. Providence was absolutely overmatched by this Sooners team. Porter Moser is known for his defense. This is an Oklahoma team that I do not want to get in the habit of targeting against. There's several teams out there that when they're on the slate, it's just like, I don't care how cheap the guy is against them. They're just not going to be a good play. I mean, if they're 3K, okay. If they're 4K, okay. But we're talking about, a guy who's normally 8K and maybe he's priced at 6.8 against Oklahoma, and people are going to be like, oh, we gotta use him. Like, I don't think so. Because this Oklahoma defense, to me, does not look like it's going to slow down anytime soon. In fact, I think it's going to get better as it goes on. And we're going to see that here against Arkansas. This is going to be a very good test for them. This game is taking place in Tulsa. KenPom has it listed as a neutral, but, I mean, come on. Let's see here. Pass it. It is a 4.5 point spread for Oklahoma and the magic number of 147 for the total. So starting with Arkansas, we had been using Trevon Brazile with no second thought. He is dealing with a ankle issue, so it's pretty tough to use him. He has been just an absolute hero for us this year. We know with Coach Musselman, he is going to rotate, and one game it'll be LLS, next game it'll be Davenport, Lane Blocker. Like, there's just no telling who it's going to be. Chandler Lawson, who had that huge game against Stanford at the end of November at 3-2, and then the very next day against Memphis, people were like, Chandler Lawson. It's like, pump the brakes. Musselman may rug him. Sure enough, he got rugged. He played 11 minutes. Now, Chandler Lawson has scored 30-plus fantasy points in back-to-back games, and if Trevon Brazile can't go, Lawson definitely looks like a play at 5-7, but you consider who it's against, Oklahoma, and this would be a spot where 5-7 suddenly doesn't look so good for Chandler Lawson. 3-7 would have been fine, but I don't know about 5-7 there. So we'll see what happens with Brazile, but I don't have the want or need to use anybody on this Arkansas team. Tremont Mark did come back a lot faster than I think a lot of people thought. That injury was very scary, getting stretchered out. Did not look great against Furman, but it was great to see him on the floor playing 26 minutes. Maybe a couple down games to get his price back down would be just what the doctor ordered. L. Ellis there at 5-1. Very cheap price for what would be a usually high usage guard, but just what we said was going to be the problem with this Arkansas team. They brought in all these ball dominant guards. How's that going to work? Somebody's going to be on the outside looking in. So far, it's L. Ellis on the outside looking in. The freshman Layden Blocker, he's been a really nice source of value over the last few games. You could have been using him like the last 5 slates and pretty much paying off. His price is still relatively cheap at 4.6. He seems to be locked into this 20-ish minute role, but you just never know with Musselman when he's going to pull the plug. And also, this matchup stinks. So I need to make that clear to everyone. This matchup stinks. Khalif Battle coming off the bench in a high usage, high volume scoring role. Sure, but 7-3 for 24 minutes off the bench against Oklahoma, not for me. On the Oklahoma side, Otega Awi had been the dude whenever Oklahoma was on the slate. He has been priced up and up and up. He's pretty much just performing like where he probably is, you'd assume he would be right around 3x at 3.5x at this price. So it's not the best, there's an opportunity cost there with him where I think he doesn't bust in your lineup. Like if you're valuing raw points, using Aui makes sense. He's just not going to blow the doors or cook the slate. So fading him generally isn't going to cost you your day. And I say that and he'll probably go off. Milos Uzan had a massive game against Providence. He was a pretty nice play, sub 6K. Just reminding people like, hey, remember me from last year. He started off the season kind of the, forgotten man down the pecking order in the last 4 games and lo and behold, as their opponents improved, Milos has been the guy to step up. So 6.6 is a bit of a high price there. Not something I think we'll be able to get to, but certainly in consideration with the way he's playing right now. Javian McCollum, who transferred in, he had a big game against Providence, 40 fantasy points as well, has scored 27 plus DK points in 3 straight, and has been taking double-digit shots in all but 1 game so far this year. Javian McCollum, he has been fantastic. Leads the team in shot rate at 26%. The Siena transfer is fitting into this system well. And the main thing to play for Porter Moser and get minutes, and this was the problem last year for certain members of Oklahoma, mainly our guy Joey Bam, if you don't defend, you can't stay on the court. And these guys do defend, which is why we're seeing Aui, Uzan, and McCollum play all the minutes that they can handle. We did see a little bit of a spike from Latrey Darthard, played 26 minutes in their last game, 27 before that. So perhaps Darthard is starting to come alive here and be an option. He is only 4.8. We saw him last year for Utah Valley. He was a key figure for them. Not probably too interested in him there at 4.8, but it is an awareness piece there that his minutes are trending up. The Oregon transfer Waddell Suarez, his minutes were up there for a while to start off, but he's starting to trend down, which has a lot to do with defense for Porter Moser. He's very, very blatant about it. We're seeing a trajectory here for Dart Harden moving up, Suarez moving down, kind of correlates. The forwards on this team, they're, John Hughley, not even starting last game. Pretty tough to utilize him. Jelon Moore has never been a consistent option, and I know a lot of people are looking at him against Providence. I didn't really love it. I know he was coming off the big game, but it was Arkansas Pine Bluff, Providence. They did blow their doors off, but difference in opponents there. I think Moore just kind of settles into more of a role player type of guy. Sam Godwin, who does start at 5'6", he's had some decent games, not a high upside play. Really not even that safe at 5'6". I'm just kind of lackluster on him. If you want to use anybody from Oklahoma in this game, I do think you go up and you find a way to play McCollum, Uzan, or Owie, but their prices are very Creighton-esque, 2022 at Creighton-esque, and that they're priced pretty much where they should be. All right, the slate is done. The core for me, it might change by the morning, but right now I'm going to be really chalky with it, or at least what I project to be chalky. Nice thing about less sites doing ownership projections and projections in general, it's made that ownership spread out, which has been great for us as a whole. Keontae Kennedy, that's just a very obvious spot to start at 4-5. I do not like the fact that Cal is playing so early in the morning. These are our kids at the end of the day. And I do feel like there's some merit there to maybe a slow start, but he's so cheap at 4-5, starting playing 30 minutes that he'll figure it out, sooner rather than later. I think the assumption is that everybody will play Zach Edey, so I won't core him because that's kind of a way to cheap out. It just an obvious spot. Riley QEL is core play number 2 at 6'6". I just don't see myself getting away from him. Love that play and have the last couple of slates. And then I will say a decision point will be Zakai Zeigler. And I know they're different price points, but I just don't know if I want 2 balls. So if I want to go down and pay down to Zeigler or up to Connect, right now I think Zeigler is going to make the 3rd spot in our core just because of how cheap he is. Starting minutes trending towards 30. Shots will start falling. He's still taking them. And when shots fall like the way we know they can, and the rest of his game is already starting to catch up to what it was pre-injury, it's just a silly price for him. We will go with the Posh Play of the Day. It's a huge slate. So far, the Posh Play of the Day has suffered. It's 0-2 so far. Not great. We don't love that. Tyler Perry started off rough. We don't do Posh Play of the Day on forwards too often. We are going to do one here. Jameer Watkins at 7K against USF. This is just the play that has, since this slate dropped and I looked at it, I keep coming back to repeatedly. There are so many things going right for Watkins in this matchup. He just seems like an inevitable problem for USF. Like if he doesn't hit 5X in this at minimum, I'm going to be sorely disappointed. I think he has 45 to 50 fantasy point upside in this spot. And I do think right now Leonard Hamilton can be trusted to play him a lot of minutes. Famous last words, but that's where I am. I don't know if I can play a guy hoping he plays 10 minutes. I'm disappointed in you, Razzle. I'm disappointed in you as your brother in arms here. I'm disappointed to hear you say that. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Playing a guy that's going to get 10 minutes is silly. Caleb Love is a main team play. I like it. I like it a lot. Let me... Got one of my oldest daughters is here. We were supposed to watch a movie, but she's tired, so she just messaged me here. All right, let's go to props, and then we'll do a lot of betting stuff in the morning. Maybe we'll even see if we can get Kutri to hang out with us. Randall's betting show starts tomorrow as well, so we don't want to interfere with that too much. Player combos has been the moneymaker for us since last year, so I am going to start by looking there, see what the current numbers are. There is a plus 100 19.5 PRA for JJ Starling. I know he's been kind of erratic, but anytime you can get plus money against Georgetown for a player like JJ Starling, who's at least going to be on the court for a lot of minutes, I am certainly willing to take that. The really profitable number for us last year on PRA was 16.5 to 20.5. So in that range, when a player who is a bona fide starter and you're getting pretty good odds, it's always worth taking the over there. So that is one with JJ Starling that don't find myself using him very much for DFS purposes this year, at least not lately. But I will definitely take his prop at 19.5. Zakai Zeigler, 15.5 at minus 125. Yeah, we're going to take that as well. I think he's back. I honestly think after this game, people will be like, Zeigler's back. I think this is the one to pull the trigger on Zeigler. Jameer Watkins' PRA is minus 130 at 24.5, by the way. So DK agrees. He's going to erupt. Let's see what his point prop is. 15.5. He probably would take the PRA. Let's see what rebounds is. We're going to have him in DFS, so we don't have to necessarily double dip. 6.5 rebounds at plus 105. It's pretty nice, actually. 8+ in 2 of his last 3. One of which was against Armando Bacot in the North Carolina Tar Heels. One of which was against the Colorado front court with Lampkin and De Silva. So just the only way he doesn't hit that is if it turns into a massive blowout or something. But God, man, he just looks so good. I don't know if I can get away from that. So I might be betting that one as well. Let's get one more here. Texas a chance to get right against Houston Christian. Caden Shedrick was awful just awful. Get a good right or a get right spot against Houston Christian. He has a 7.5 rebound prop. I do like that for a nice bounce back for Shedrick. A nice double-double, like a 13 and 10 double-double for Shedrick. Not the 2020 business, but just enough to get it done and hit that rebounding prop. I'm on board with that one. And Don, you wanted a one pick to rule them all. And I think I have it for you. There is a relatively lean spot here, but do we really trust South Carolina? They're playing East Carolina. South Carolina's -5. East Carolina was without in their last game Ezra Azar, who's one of their best players, their highest usage guy. But he did return against Maryland Eastern Shore. That is normal big game. Ken Pom has this 74-67 in favor of South Carolina, but ECU is home. They have a fairly nice starting 5. Brandon Johnson, Bobby Pettiford, who I like a lot, by the way. Ezra Azor, RJ Felton, and the eternal Quentin DeBeneget, who is somehow only a junior, even though it feels like he's been playing since before COVID. I just do not believe or trust in South Carolina whatsoever to cover 5 on the road. So that East Carolina play right there at +5, that's the one, Don. That's the one that's going to give us success and rectify and exercise those NC State demons. If not, we might have to stay away from these Carolina schools. But no, I feel pretty good about +5 East Carolina. I just South Carolina, whatever. You know, besides for Michi Johnson, their team's very uninspiring to me, and I think East Carolina is actually better than people give them credit for. All right, I appreciate everybody who hung out with me tonight. I know it kind of ran long. Good to see you, Razzle. Good to see you, Don, and all the people who are watching live on Twitter and Twitch. We got it going on all of those. Please make sure you're hitting the applicable like buttons, helping us out there. Commenting, sharing, all of that stuff helps within not only the YouTube algorithm, but just, the content in general, showing your support. I like it. I love it. I appreciate it. Also on the on-demand videos, I'll circle back and interact with people on their comments there. We'll be back tomorrow morning, bright and early, 8 a.m. So literally like a work shift away, I'll be back in front of your screens. That's going to be a true Q&A session. I'll check and see if there's going to be any other people online. Maybe I'll get a few people to hop on as well, or get people on to ask their questions, something we've been toying around with. But that'll be related to any of the slates, any of the games. If you want to ask about Army-Navy Showdown, you can do that as well. 1 hour, my time. I'm here to help you guys in any way, shape, or form that you want. Appreciate the continued support, and I'll be back bright and early. Let's get those green screens. Let's get a seat. Let's get the next seat in the FTN family once again, or at least somebody that we know. Maybe it's Razzle's time. I don't know. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the morning. Best of luck. Let's get it done.